Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast, a show dedicated to the idea that when organizations care enough to show their people that who they are and what they do matter, they unlock the only business idea with truly unlimited potential. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. About a year ago, Bob Chapman, our CEO, wrote a LinkedIn post on millennials. I'm sure you've heard the term bandied about. Millennials are the current generation who are entering the workplace. A largely misunderstood but educated, creative, and technologically savvy generation that will make up 75% of the workforce by 2025. Bob's post came after a video on this topic by our friend Simon Sinek went viral. At this point, it's been seen by almost 10 million people. I think even Simon himself was surprised by the number of views, but the interest might be explained by something he said. Quote, "Apparently millennials are tough to manage, and they're accused of being entitled, narcissistic, self-interested, unfocused, lazy. But entitled is the big one. And because they confound leadership so much, what's happening is leadership is asking the millennials, 'What do you want?'" End quote. And according to Simon, current leaders think that millennials want to work in a place with purpose, they want to have an impact, and they want free food and beanbags. But Simon and Bob Chapman both feel the issue in millennial leadership is pretty simple. Like everyone else, they want leadership, real leadership, truly human leadership. To further explore this topic, we went straight to the source. Anya Sullivan and Courtney Godfrey are millennial teammates who are doing very important work in the BW Leadership Institute, through which we help other organizations undertake the critical steps to implement their own culture change. Courtney has been in the workforce for several years now, while Anya is just starting her journey. On this episode of the Everybody Matters podcast, Anya and Courtney are joined by Susan Conrad, Director of Outreach at the BW Leadership Institute. In this discussion, they talk about the issues surrounding millennials, and from their own experience, give tips on how leaders can engage with this generation. So here's Susan, Anya, and Courtney from the BW Leadership Institute. And Susan will start us off.
So that reputation and the stereotype that millennials need constant feedback. What do you think about that? Anya, is that accurate?
Yeah, it's funny because I think when I read the reputations of millennials, a lot of them kind of make me think and self-reflect. Is that a need that I have? And maybe is that a need that everyone has, but maybe I'm the only one asking for it? Because I think so many of the stereotypes or the needs of millennials, so many people in the workplace need. I just think maybe we're a little bit younger and bolder and are asking for it. And I think it's really just a misinterpretation of the need that maybe perhaps it's not continuous and constant feedback, but it's just a regular listening, coaching session, and just having someone on your team that's vouching for you and really having an intentional conversation, whether that's quarterly, whether that's yearly. I think more frequently is probably better, but I know, some organizations are so enormous. Our team is a little bit smaller, and it's a little bit more easier for us to check in with each other on a more daily basis. But I just think of my need. I can definitely see myself in that stereotype and needing that feedback. But I think for me, it's just me knowing that I would be checking in with someone on the team on a continuous basis just puts a reassurance in my head of, okay, at some point someone will, and not even looking over the projects I'm working on or making sure I'm doing things right, but I'll have some sort of feedback and continuous conversation with the same person. And I think there's kind of 2 points of that, the regularness of it, but then I think the other piece that's important is that it's with the same person or maybe the same 2 or 3 people, and they can be giving you continuous feedback. And I just think it's a really cool responsibility of leader. Right now I don't have anyone in my own span of care. I don't have someone reporting to me per se, but I think it's a really amazing opportunity to be able to have that impact on someone's life and be able to coach them through, especially the younger years of their career, and really give them all the tools and experience that you yourself have learned over 10, 20, 30 years of working to give to someone who's only been working for a year. That's what I would call the true responsibility of leadership, and spending your time with the younger leaders of your team. I mean, it'll only be a benefit to you in the long run, and it'll only positively impact your business to help them grow. And I think there's definitely the fine line between like hand-holding and making sure that you know, all of a sudden maybe they feel like they have to come to you for everything. I really think it's just a coaching conversation, you know, that they don't necessarily feel like you need to check mark every single thing they're doing, but just that they can come to you with questions or for advice and have that continuity conversation. So I wouldn't say it's a constant affirmation. I would just say we crave to have that relationship that we know will have like a regular cadence. Mm-hmm. What would you think, Court?
Yeah, I would layer onto in terms of feedback, ensuring that it's coming from a place of empathy. So as millennials, we lovingly call this season of lives adulting for the first time. And knowing that a lot of our leaders probably haven't thought in a while about the first time that they have signed up for benefits or planned for retirement or figuring out how to save and budget. And there's so many other things going on outside of work for millennials in the season of life that they're, you know, really getting to grow in. And I think it's important for leaders to be able to give feedback from a place of empathy because of all these firsts that are going on in their world. So if they feel like they have a space to learn and feel cared for and supported, it really can just do so much for a millennial's growth and to feel that confidence in their new role. And I would say, too, no one shows up to work to fail. So no millennial, no human, no one wants to come to work and feel like they're asking for too much feedback or needing too much. I think it's just the balance of having a leader who really is creating that time and space to provide that support and care will really allow that person to feel empowered. And then I would just say, a challenge too is I know we're busy, right? It takes time to sit and give that feedback. And so I would say is for, our true belief in the Institute is time is the currency of leadership. And so what's that motive, checking your motive of that time you're spending with a millennial on your team. We would say if you're kind of viewing it as annoying or cumbersome or taking up time, I would just say, how can you shift that mentality and say, gosh, what about that being the awesome responsibility of leadership to care for that person and provide that space for them to grow and really listen to their needs and how you can support them in this season. And I would say when I feel supported and empowered, I feel like I can do anything on the team. And I think that's such a gift that anyone could give to anyone on their team.
Fantastic. Courtney, we're fortunate that you made the decision to come to BW Leadership Institute after starting your career in college admissions. And one of the studies we found recently is that Forbes found that 6 out of 10 college students really aren't interested in making a career in business. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I would totally one of those 6 out of 10. After being really involved in college in a lot of purpose-driven organizations, there's so much opportunity to get involved. And you think about, I was giving so much of my heart and my talents for free. Just because I felt so compelled to be a part of these organizations and have great leadership roles, and then graduated and thought, okay, how am I going to channel what I've learned and how I've grown as a leader into my future career? And it felt very overwhelming and truly not motivating at all to think about going into quote-unquote corporate America, just because of the views I had on it from my parents' friends, people who I already knew were going out into the workforce, and how frustrating it was, how tiring it was, how they didn't feel cared for at work, just the draining mentality that I often heard. And so for me, I went straight into nonprofit, higher education, thinking the only way I can contribute to the world in a good way is to actually work in those parts. But then realizing business can and should be an opportunity for good in the world. And having met the BW family and the BW Leadership Institute, really realizing this is my calling and this is exactly what I've been, preparing for in terms of all the work that I've done leading up to this. And I just think when you have an organization that casts a purposeful vision, people will follow and they'll be on board. And when you're creating space for each person to really share their unique gifts and talents and seeing how that ultimately connects to the higher purpose of an organization, you've got an incredible environment for people to learn and grow and to contribute. So that would just be, you know, my take on in terms of that statistic. It is sad, right? Because of the work that we do at the Institute, you know, we want businesses to be that place where people want to go and want to give their talents and really want to serve. And I think we have the great responsibility and opportunity to shift that statistic and that mindset by providing purposeful organizations and purposeful work for people.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, Anya?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think similarly to Courtney, I studied communications and French in college and was definitely looking to get into more of a boutique agency or a smaller company, which actually kind of aligned with the Leadership Institute team. Even though we're growing, we're still around 20 people. So that part of it I really do enjoy, but was definitely looking to live in probably a bigger city on the West or the East Coast, potentially abroad, and starting my career in a very like high-driven, high hours, you know, feeling like I need to prove myself before moving into a different role. And that's just typically how it often runs in roles in marketing or communications, is you kind of have to put in the 70-hour grind for a couple of years, and then you get to shine in a role that you don't have to completely sell your soul to. And I just remember graduating college and leaving St. Louis and moving home to live with my parents in California while I was looking for a job, and just spending that summer really thinking about what do I actually want to do. And I just remember so often telling my parents, like, I just really want to use all these gifts that I have, and I don't really know what kind of job. And I was applying for just about any job you could think of, really all around the country, but not really focusing on the Midwest since I had gone to school here, and I kind of felt like I'd been there, done that kind of mentality. And I love new places, so I was ready for something different. And then was reached out to by Courtney, who is actually just a friend of my sister's, and I had known her, and I'd actually heard Kasha say before Courtney even talked to me about the Leadership Institute, that Courtney really liked her job. And I still remember Kasha saying, I don't really know what she does, but she really likes it. And we probably sometimes don't even know what we do. So my sister referred me to Courtney, and I still remember talking to Courtney on the phone for the first time, and she kept talking about the culture of the team and the people and the culture of the team and the people. And I was like, that's great, but I also want to know like what work I'm going to do. And to me, as a millennial just graduating college, that's what I viewed as most important. I never thought the culture of the organization is what I should be looking for. I was like, what are the projects I'm going to be working on? What can I put on my resume for my next job when I leave you guys? And then coming into that interview, being completely candid, and I've already told everyone on the team this, so I'm really not a surprise. But I was very taken aback with we work in a very typical corporate environment. It's what I like to call a cube farm. I have, the typical gray cube with the black chair and the double screen. I mean, it's not really anything that trendy or fancy. But the way that the team made me feel when I was here for the interview is like none of that even existed, because it just doesn't matter at the end of the day. So I think just encouragement to people who are listening, or some of the people who've come to our classes, and they've come up to me during the class and said, you're so young, but you're working for this really driven, purposeful team, so of course you want to stay. And I almost want to bring them back to my desk and be like, this is what I'm working with. Like, I thought I was going to be living in San Francisco, working in some high story, really cool open space, ping pong tables everywhere kind of place. And I couldn't ask for anything better than what I have right now. So I just think just a note of encouragement to people who are maybe wondering, if this millennial generation is 25% of the workforce, and I work for a company that, I don't know, does plumbing or builds cabinets or works with, in manufacturing plants. I mean, that's the roots of Barry-Wehmiller, and you can have just as much of an impact on someone's life. It really, at the end of the day, like Courtney was saying, it doesn't matter if you're working in a cube or if you're working in New York City in some amazing flat. I think if you are surrounded by people who really care about you and have a purpose, and you see your purpose aligning with the overall mission of the company, you'll stay, and you'll really love it. So yeah, I think just that confusion that sometimes people have of the stereotype that millennials are going to need happy hours on Fridays and be able to come in to work at 10 a.m. and leave at 3 or whatever the stereotype is. I think just a perspective shift would be important. Let's not focus on what the stereotype is or what you think millennials need, but I think just focusing on let's just shift the perception of business and make it so that when millennials are graduating from schools, they see organizations that are really empowering their people to do what they love to do, to give feedback. And I think that's just so beneficial for a company who wouldn't want fresh eyes to come in and tell you, hey, maybe this system is a little antiquated, or hey, I know a better way we can do this, or have we ever thought about this? I mean, I think if you really want to grow as a business and be really dynamic, that's exactly what I would want for my business. So I would say just maybe not so much focusing on the 6 out of 10 that don't want to join it, and just really focusing on what can you do in your organization to make it so that people really feel connected to the team, feel connected to the vision, and feel like their purpose aligns with it. And then I think whether you work in a cube farm or in London in some, on some fancy Oxford street, it won't matter. At the end of the day, I think you'll attract the right people and they'll stay.
I would tell you the one that, as I read through those stereotypes, the one I really struggled with is this idea that millennials do not have a work ethic, because that's one that really hasn't been what I've seen or witnessed or experienced, whether that's here with the BW Leadership Institute or in previous environments. I would tell you that the people that I've met, the young millennials that are in the workforce, and some of them, like Courtney, in leadership roles already, are very driven, are intentional, are just as competitive as folks from my generation. And from my perspective, I would say bring a refreshing sense of candor and honesty to the workplace. I give you a lot of credit because you asked the questions that I think people my age or my generation didn't ask, and thought maybe it wasn't appropriate. And I love that you have that courage to say, hey, let's talk about this and let's think about it. So it can be a little surprising, right? So every once in a while you're like, wow, okay, well, let's go there. Let's talk about that, right? But I think that it actually has caused me to stop and reflect on, looking back on my career and thinking, well, how did I learn what I've learned, right? How can I be more intentional about helping people on our team grow and develop? How can I help them connect what they do to the purpose? And frankly, I think it's just caused me to up my game. I think having millennials in the workforce has caused me to kind of think and grow and develop and say, hey, how can I be a better leader? And how can I serve them better so that they can achieve all that they're really capable of? I mean, this whole idea of the technology savvy, and, I always say I'm going to put Susan Conrad, BTOT on my business card. Bermuda Triangle of Technology, right? It's not, I'm not known for having those skills, and I'm so appreciative that it's so easy. It's not intimidating, or like I said, the candid conversations. I think we were able to adjust and move faster, and I think we as leaders have to recognize that your work looks different. Just because I don't see you doesn't mean you're not working and thinking about the business. That flexibility says I have to recognize, hey, maybe you do your best thinking with earbuds in and, at the coffee shop in a place where you can get up and move and you're not tied to your cube. And so we have to recognize that that's actually good, because hopefully that brings fresh and new ideas to our work. And so it's causing us to be, I think, a little more reflective, or at least me, and learn how to respond in different ways and learn to connect. So I think it's actually a good thing. And I would tell you, I don't know many, I don't know any lazy millennials. So not in the group that I've worked with. As we kind of move from the conversation of what do we think, I kind of asked the two of you, what can we do? Right? What are, as leaders or as just people working with other people, having millennials in our workforce, on our teams, in our client relationships and our vendor relationships, what are things that we could do that you'd suggest we put in practice to make a better connection, to build those stronger teams and relationships, and to really embrace millennials in the workforce?
Yeah, I can go first with one off the top of my head, but I think with all of these kind of more tangible things that you could do, say starting tomorrow or starting this afternoon, or is when Courtney and I were thinking about, what could you do, or what does our team do that we just almost take for granted, and it's just a natural practice or a norm on our team. But one that I was not necessarily surprised by, because this was my first full-time role, but I worked in the Office of Admissions when I was attending university as a student ambassador, and I worked in a couple of roles where we would have calendar sharing capabilities, and I never really could see full details on someone's calendars. I could see maybe blocks of time, or they had certain preferences where I could see some things that they assign and some things I couldn't. I just figured, okay, that's how business works. You're kind of secretive about your schedule, or we have to have this really long email chain to figure out a time that works. And something that was really cool here is I started it on my first day. It's just been something that's really so refreshing, and I think from the very first day of someone joining our team, they get a taste of our culture just from that first initial. Really, it's not even an action. It's just such an easy thing it's such an extension of trust. And for me to be able to see the calendar of the managing partner and throw on, Courtney and Jen were telling me to meet with members of the team to get to know them, and for me to be able to just see her calendar, put 30 minutes on, and she accepted. I mean, it was just so easy. So I think from a business standpoint, from practical side of it, it will just eliminate email chains. It's so much easier, truly, by the business of it, for me to see what people's calendars are, and I can assign meetings or schedule or even project scope, and I can see what's on their calendar and set more appropriate deadlines than if I had no visibility into what they're working on. But then I think from a culture side, more of the intangible side of it, I think it just automatically shares so much trust with your new team members. I mean, for all they know, if I'm a millennial, if I'm a flight risk, as they say, I could have left 2 weeks and I would have known, so many things that were on their calendar for months from now, or client work or contracts and things like that. And for me, it was such an extension of trust, and just working with some of my friends, or having started working and then talking with some of my friends who also joined the workforce as well, who work in extremely, tight, almost secure environments where they can't really see what the other people on their team are working on. And it just, there's a lack of empathy, I think. I think a lot of empathy is lost when you can't see, wow, you have a really busy day today, so I'm going to hold off on that meeting. We can push it to next week because it looks like you have a really crammed week. Or I can look at my leader's schedule and say, oh, you've been out of town for the last 2 weeks, so putting that on a Monday morning is probably not the best idea. You'll be feeling a little overwhelmed, so why don't I push it to Thursday? It's just such an easy, free way to build team culture on so many levels. But I think the biggest part for me was just seeing that extension of trust from day one.
Courtney, what about you? What can we do?
Yes, I think another opportunity and something that you can do right away is just the rhythm and intention of recognition. So kind of tying back to that stereotype of millennials needing feedback, I think one way of looking at it as giving someone the opportunity to hear why they're valuable to the team. And recognition and celebration is a core part of our team. And for me, I think about, everybody deserves to know that who they are and what they do matters. So whether it's a millennial or any other generation, any other age or role on the team, needs to know that the work that they're doing is valued and who they are is valuable. And so, thinking about ways that you can do this, action items right away. So something that I've thought of recently is, if we end a meeting a couple minutes early, that's time you never had. So how can you use that to write someone a handwritten note, maybe shoot them an email or a reply, instead of just saying, oh, great job, thanks for passing that on. You can actually take the time to say, how did I feel about the behavior that you just did, and how does that impact the team overall? Those things really mean so much more than just a traditional great job or thanks. When you're actually taking the time to share about the character, the gifts and talents of that person, who they are and what they do is making an impact on the team. It's just goes above and beyond. I have a whole drawer full of notes that people on the team have given me, and I oftentimes, if it's just a tough week, will just go in there and grab one. And it's just so nice to be able to say, okay, even though there's some crazy things going on this week or I'm feeling overwhelmed, overwhelmed that the work I'm doing is truly making an impact on the team. So connecting back to that purpose, back to that feedback, it means so much. And not only is it an awesome thing to receive it, but also to give it. So a practice that we do also is we have a touch meeting every Friday, and for our team to get together, our team here in St. Louis, our remote team members as well, for that first 10 minutes, we just kick off with recognition and celebration. And it gives everybody a time to just share some highlights of people that they have really just seen do some amazing work this past week. And for me, I'm smiling ear to ear hearing about all the things that other people on the team are doing and how others are recognizing each other. It's just like the best way to wrap up a week and leaves everybody feeling so fulfilled. So quick action item. It only takes 5 minutes to write a handwritten note, shoot a really thoughtful email, or even just pop over to somebody's desk and say, hey, I just so appreciate the work that you're doing on this, and just giving them that feedback then and there is so helpful. So that's something that I would add. What else would you? Oh,
I was going to say those are great ways to kind of build the relationship that Anya talked about.
Yeah.
Or, just the calendar visibility and deepening that connection. And say, Anya, if you had any other ideas on, this idea of shifting your mindset from millennial to people and relationships, what else could we do to build those relationships?
Yeah, I think with the thought, I think it's always really important for businesses to exist with the scope of and the perspective of how do we continuously improve. And when I joined our team, I think some people were still like 50% on our team and 50% working in other roles in the company. So I think we were like 5.5 or 6.5 or something like that. And now being close to 20 and having people live from everywhere from South Africa to California. And then with majority of the team, the biggest chunk of the team, I should say, being in St. Louis, it's been really cool to see us evolve and shift and not stick in those practices that even for me being here a year ago we were doing, and really recognize that was great for that season of our institute team. But now we being bigger and being a little bit more scattered around the world and different time zones and all of that, how do we continuously update people if you don't work across the cube from me? How are you still feeling in the loop and still feeling connected? And I think one way of doing that we've started to implement is to have quarterly business meetings. So we have a quarterly we call it all hands on deck, but basically just a business update. And I think one part of this that's really amazing is it's not just the senior leaders on our team, or it's not just, 2 or 3 of the same people. It's everyone on our team getting visibility to the real work of a business. And I think especially for someone who is a little bit more young and fresh to the business world like I am, I didn't get my degree from the business school. I had it in more of the liberal arts side of things. And it's been really beneficial for me because I feel like my business savvy just shoots up every time we have one of those meetings, because I understand more and more the nuts and bolts of our business and how we're actually sustaining and how we're growing and our goals and our financial goals and our people goals. And then we always tie it back to, okay, what does this actually mean? These are the lives that we touch. These are the people that we worked with. So it's been really, really cool to see some of the senior leaders put that together and then to share it with everyone on the team. But then I would also challenge, if you're going to have more of that business update meeting, every quarter, and if you're a larger organization, it could be every team, every functional team is having that business meeting, and then maybe you're sending an overall note for the overall state of the business if you can't physically gather everyone together, is to combine it with then another personal connection side of things. So our kind of goal for 2018 is to have a quarterly business meeting followed by more of a team bonding or something like that. And I think if a business exists with just one without the other, you can kind of fall into two extremes. If you're just existing in a world where all you're doing is business updates and really focusing on the numbers and that side of things, you'll start to lose the personal connection to the vision. Whereas my minute work of filling out a document with the people coming for a class, where does that fit into this? You'll start to lose that. But then if you also, on the flip side, don't really focus on the business and solely focus on building a culture of people, at some point you have to sustain those people with salary. So you do need to give them insight onto how their work is filling into the business and business strategies. So you can't, this is what we tell people all the time, you can't really have one without the other. I think the most high-performing teams that we've seen, and just from experience being on a team like ours that functions so quickly and so dynamically, I think about the need to have both the business side of things coupled with the opportunity to share and that personal connection. And it can be something as easy as, giving leaders on your team a budget every month to just take, their 5 or 10 people in their span of care to Starbucks like a Friday morning, or to have a team lunch every quarter. Or it doesn't have to be something. I think sometimes we get caught up in, oh my gosh, we're going to have to build this huge system, and it can be something as small as just ordering in Chipotle. So I think just making sure that you have both of those sides will really make your team feel empowered, from a sense of I feel a personal connection to other people on my team, and empowered, like I really understand where my role fits into the business of the business, which I think is really powerful, especially from someone who's maybe a little bit younger, and I don't automatically see where the work I do falls into those business strategies, just from lack of experience. So what about you, Cor? Any other things?
Yeah, I would say even on a smaller scale from that in terms of connection, and even feeding back to what you were talking about earlier with more structured conversations, consistency in conversation. So I now have the opportunity to lead 2 new team members, which is very humbling and exciting and overwhelming in all these different ways. And just thinking about for both of them, they're, the core vision and mission is the same, but they're 2 very different people. And so for me to be able to sit down individually and get to know who they are as a person, and what excites them about their role, what's challenging about their role, what is something that they haven't learned yet that they're looking forward to, or what's something that they're like not super interested in, and how can we maybe remove that from their role. If you're not creating those conversations or space for those conversations, it's really hard to get to know someone and what they really bring to the table. And I think leaders go first with this too. So creating kind of that vulnerable space to maybe bring up or ask some of those questions. Think about if there's not a structure around when do we talk about salary, when do we talk about maybe shifting into a different role. That's very overwhelming for a millennial, or really anyone, if the environment's not created to where they feel safe to ask those questions. And so for me as a new leader, I'm really thinking about how can I be intentional about bringing those conversations up and creating a space for team members to be able to share. So it's an exciting time. There's so much to learn and enjoy about each person, and just creating that consistency so that way, when I have meetings, one-on-one meetings with those in my span of care, they're able to come prepared with questions or needs, or I'm working on this project. It could be something very quick and easy, or it could be a kind of a bigger conversation around, this project that they're working on is challenging. And so how can we provide more support or more training or more onboarding to really equip them with what they need to do to grow and learn. So just the consistency of those conversations is so valuable, and just never something to take for granted, because when I don't know the next time I can have a conversation with my leader or come with needs that I have, I'm going to be wandering around aimlessly making decisions. And it's just so important to have kind of that structured format for having them.
If you'd like to find out more about the work of the BW Leadership Institute, or see their upcoming class schedule, go to bwleadershipinstitute.com. You can also follow them on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter at BW Lead Institute. If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Raja Zodia's book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. For updates on the book, this podcast, and for a lot of great content and insight, don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening. And don't forget, Everybody Matters is the only business idea with truly unlimited potential.